everyone, my name is Lance, and this is About Aimpad. For today's episode, I'd like to show you a couple of interesting things, so let's jump right into it. The first of these is I was able to get a hold of a new switch from Atomax called the Flaretech Switch. Now the Flaretech Switch is a switch that's different from normal cherry switches that uses electrical connections to decide whether or not a key is being pressed, and this uses optical light. They made some modifications to it recently this year that allows them to measure exactly how far down the key is being pressed and then send those varying degrees of analog signals to the computer. Now this is very interesting to me because this operates on the exact same principle as Aimpad, where the more optical light that's being detected, we know that more that the key is being pressed further and further down. So I was very eager to try it out and to test it and determine how effective it was at making analog signals and being effectively used for gaming and things like that. So I started jumping right into it and trying to get a good understanding of what was going on. And as I was testing it, there was some really weird things going on. It was really hard for me to explain. I knew something just felt off. It was just not what I was used to using Aimpad keyboards. So I was very eager to try to figure out what was going on as you push the key down. So I got a hold of this tool. It's a digital height gauge. It basically allows you to precisely measure how far down a key is being pressed. And so I can say in precision of 0.01 millimeters as it's being pressed down, what type of analog signal is being sent to the computer. So I decided to go through that methodology and figure out over and over again through multiple tests, hundreds of tests, to try to figure out what was going on with that switch. So I'd like to show you how I set up this whole concept using this tool, and so I'll show you that now. Here is the methodology that I used in order to precisely measure how far down the key was being pressed and how that translated into an analog signal. And basically what we did is we set up this tool and precisely place it over a key. And you can see as I adjust this knob, you can see the little plunger hovering above the W key in the bottom left corner. I can move it up and down in very, very small, precise measurements. So basically when I would take this all the way down to the 0.00 section in the top left corner, you can see where it says axis 1. Currently it's registering at 0 of an analog input. So if I move this down just a little bit, you'll see at 0.07 millimeters, it has now changed to 0.019, so somewhere around 1 or 2% of an analog signal. So that's basically the equivalency of moving an Xbox controller 1% of the way up. So if I keep on going down around 0.3 millimeters, it now registers at 0.08. So again, that's about 8% of a movement. So what I would do is just write down in Excel the measurement depth here. So I would write down 0.32 as 0.32 millimeters, and then write down the analog signal of 0.08, and then keep on going down in very small increments, sometimes at 0.05 millimeters, or sometimes I would just do 0.1 millimeter. So just take a bunch of measurements, a lot of measurements, and keep on going down all the way through the key press and get an idea of exactly what type of analog signal we're getting, all the way through down to the very bottom of the key press at 4 millimeters, and it would be an analog signal of 1 or 100% of that analog range. And I would just basically write down all that data and then graph it. And so I'd like to show you what the graph looks like on these different types of switches. All right, so if you don't like data, you probably want to skip this section, but I love data. This is really, really interesting stuff to me. So if I get overzealous, I apologize. But basically, in an ideal situation, an ideal switch configuration for analog switches, what should happen is as you push the key down, a consistent analog signal should be sent to the computer, precisely matching up with how you push it down. So on this graph here, you can see the bottom is for key press depth. So that's from 0 millimeters down 4 millimeters, okay, all the way through the key press. And on the left is the actual analog value being sent. So at the very bottom is 0, meaning that there's no analog signal being sent. And if you push it down all the way, then you should be getting a value of 1, meaning it's pushed down all the way. And then you have a bunch of incrementals within that, okay? Perfect situation. This is what we really, really want. This is excellent type of control. With the Flaretech switch, this is the response that we're kind of getting on average. So there's a few things that are pretty obvious at the standpoint of it's not a straight linear line. It's not providing that type of signal. The other really big problem here is between 0 millimeters and 1.5 millimeters, when you're pushing it down, there's no analog signal being sent to the computer at all. That means it's an effectively 30% of dead zone that you can't actuate or activate anything in the key press. And that's a really, if you watched my previous videos, a really, really bad thing. You do not want that for an intuitive user experience. If you push the key down and you know that you're pushing the key down, but nothing's happening, it's really confusing to the user and it's really hard to control. The other part of it, at the very end of the key press, the last 0.5 millimeters of the key press, there again is no signal change at all. It's going to be the max value that's being detected. So that is two big chunks of it. In fact, it's half of it, since between 1.5 millimeter and 3.5 millimeter there's change being detected. The other half there's not. So half of the key can be pressed. 2 millimeters is really, really small. 4 millimeters is small enough, but 2 is really bad. That's the amount of control you have. The other thing is, it's not a straight line even within that 2 millimeters. There's this funky little curve thing that's going on in the middle of it. But again, this is average. So if I took a bunch of different measurements across different switches, swapped places and things like that to try to get a general idea of what type of performance I should expect in general from switch to switch, this is what it looks like in general. However, if you look at it on in each individual switch, this is what you get. This is horrible. Not only is the line not straight, it's not consistent between each switch. It's vastly different. Some of them start at like 1.8 millimeters. Some of them start at 1.3 millimeters. Some of them end at 3.5. Some of them end at 3 millimeters. Some of them go at this weird kind of plateauish at the beginning and then spike up at the end. Some actually go up and then start going down again the more you push it down, and then it goes back up again. It's a mess. It's all over the place, and it's for me, using this type of switch is horrible. It's unacceptable that there's that much variance with each individual switch. It's appalling. Now, what I decided to do was, okay, well, if I'm going to judge that Flaretech switch, I need to accurately judge what's happening with the Aimpad ones, right? So what I decided to do is the exact same type of test a bunch of different switches on different places and things like that, and this is what it looks like. Now, you'll see that it's much tighter and much more consistent from switch to switch. It's not perfect. There's going to be some variance from the measurements that I was doing. Maybe there's some variance of 0.001 or 0.005 or 0.009 or whatever. Lots of variance can happen, so it's not going to be precise and perfect, and that's acceptable to me because at least it's a consistent shape all the way through. It's not that mess. Now, when I saw this, we knew it wasn't a direct linear relationship, that from the very bottom from the top of the press to the very bottom of the press, it wasn't perfectly straight. We thought it was pretty good and it felt good, and so we didn't concern ourselves with it too much. But that's not linear, right? That's not what I was touting as the ideal situation, the perfect situation. So that's unacceptable to me. So it was good for me to get this tool to find out what's actually happening on our analog switches, and how we can go about solving for correcting this issue. So it took several days, some coordination with one of my good friends, Tad, thank you very much, to figure out how to reverse this weird curve that we have, because it's not a perfect curve. It's kind of complicated to explain, but basically ran it through some algorithms to correct this so that I can say when I get this value, rather than using that raw value, use this value instead to make it look like this. It's a much, much straighter line. It's still not perfect. I need to make a few tweaks here and there, but basically we now have a near perfect linear line relationship all the way from 0 millimeters to 4 millimeters and have a perfectly straight angled line. It's awesome. Not awesome. Awesome. So that's what we've been focusing on. It's been fantastic. Now, the other thing that I wanted to show you was I was thinking of doing something for a long time where, what if you made a game that was specifically designed for an analog keyboard? Take everything you know about using keyboard and mouse and joysticks and everything like that, throw it all out and say, I'm going to have an analog keyboard. What kind of games could I make that focus exactly on analog switches and some type of compelling gaming experience that's not available using a normal keyboard? So I started thinking through different ways, and I said, you know what, I can make a game. I'm going to make a game. So I made a game. And this is the game that I made. So basically the concept is you are a snake who's found its way inside of a restaurant, and as someone is ordering a shake, the guy says, "Hey, would you like fries with that snake?" Because he sees the snake and freaks out. So those fries that he's ordered have flown all over the restaurant floor, and the snake obviously loves to eat French fries. So he is now trying to become the biggest snake that he can by eating as many French fries as possible. So the concept is using the ASD and F keys. It allows you to control different segments of the body snake, and you're trying to line up the body of the snake with the fries that are on the floor. So essentially, the more you push down each of these individual keys, I'm going to let that one slide through. So the green section is controlled with the A key, the S key is controlled by the second segment, the D key by the third segment, and the F key controls the last segment. So basically the concept is you need to push these down and line them up with the body of the snake. If the fries hit the side of the snake, then it makes this little sound, burning the snake and rendering the consumption of those fries useless. There's also these giant ones that are much more difficult to make it through, but you get a lot more higher calorie intake eating a onion ring than you do a French fry. So obviously the higher reward that you get for it. But basically the concept that is important here is that it's really a very challenging game, because not are you controlling how fast or in which direction something is moving, you're controlling precisely how far down an element is being controlled. So basically you have to have very, very precise control of all of those keys, and you want it to be directly linear. You don't want it to be like, okay, nice and easy to control at the beginning of the press, but then all of a sudden it just bottoms out really fast and you don't have this great control down towards the bottom. You want perfect control all the way through that key press. Otherwise this type of game would not be possible to control effectively. So the concept is you have these multipliers based off the number that you are getting in a row. So right now the multiplier is at 300%, so every fry I get, it counts as 3 times the value. Dang it. And you're trying to get as high calorie intake as you can, and then you post your high score. And then in the top right corner is the body temperature of the snake, that as you fail, that thermometer will continue to increase and become less viable for you to survive as a snake. So it's a very silly game. It's still very early alpha, but the concept I think is pretty fun and challenging. So I've had a few of my friends play through just to see what they thought of it, and they've helped me make a bunch of modifications to improve it. It was really, really rough not too long ago, but I think it's in pretty decent shape, and the fries will start coming faster and faster, and the speed will go faster and faster, and eventually it becomes nightmarish. So I'll keep on going on here for a little bit to show you what the gameplay is like, but I'd be interested in seeing what you think about a game specifically designed to be played with an analog keyboard in this fashion. And it's going to start to get a little bit nuts here in a second, but I'll try and post a decent score. I'm going to stop talking because it's hard now. Oh my goodness. I also forgot to mention there's these pinkish colored ones that spawn relatively rare that decrease your body temperature because there's some strawberry shake that spilled on the ground. Obviously that reduces the body temperature of the snake. Everyone knows that. I don't think I'm doing so well, but I'm getting there. Oh yeah, oh yeah. So it's an interesting concept of trying to keep track of each segment of the body snake, because the impulse is to just rush them up, and then you, oh my gosh, it's hard. So some of it's just going to be blind dumb luck, but overall, ah, freak. And I'm getting close to failing here. Oh, lowered. Oh, failing. Oh, missed. Oh, crap. Things are not looking good for my old Snake. Bah! Alright, so it's asking me for my name. I'm just gonna stick in Aimpad is awesome. Obviously it is. Alright, so hopefully you enjoyed that video and that game that I made. If you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear from you. If you would like to see more of these videos, go ahead and subscribe. Hope to have some more interesting content for you shortly. Otherwise, thanks for watching.